Okay, we will make a start. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Helen from Nottinghamshire Carers Association, and we help to run the Carers Space NOTS group. We are this afternoon discussing all things about contributing to care, paying for care, and disability related expenditure this afternoon. So here's our agenda for today. So Carers Space, for anybody who is new to us this afternoon, is a network of carers and professionals who are brought together to talk about all things related to caring roles and developing services. It's particularly focused on co-production and giving carers the opportunity to feed into the way services are shaped and developed across the county. And I will talk a little bit more later on about involvement opportunities that are out there for carers at the moment, and how to get involved in those things. But this afternoon's topic, as selected by some of our carers, is paying for care. And then we will hear from Bridget Shilton all about paying for care and how that works through Nottinghamshire County Council. We will then hear from Catherine and Adrian, who are two carers who have been involved in co-producing guidance around disability-related expenditure, and they will tell you about how they've been involved in that, what it is and how it works. We'll then have an opportunity for some Q&A for both Bridget and for Catherine and Adrian around their topics. Then we've got Layla Brailsford with us from the Welfare Rights team at Nottinghamshire County Council to give us a wider view on other ways people can get support with benefits and welfare rights across Nottinghamshire County. We'll have time then to discuss those topics all together, and for anyone to share any questions or experiences or anything they'd like to find out more about. If we haven't got the answers for you amongst the participants this afternoon, then we will endeavour to go off and find those answers for you and share them, and feedback on the topics of discussion today. Then, as I said, I'll be telling you about the involvement opportunities we've got for carers at the moment across the county. And James will then finish off just before 3 o'clock, telling you how you can stay in touch with us and find out everything that's going on through Carers Space. So that's our afternoon for us today. So I am going to hand over now to Bridget, who is going to start us off talking about paying for care from Nottinghamshire County Council.
Okay, so my name is Bridget Shilton. I'm the team manager at Adult Care Financial Services. And apart from all things charging, which we do deal with direct payments, payments to providers. So that'd be people in residential care. We pay people that receive a direct payment, so where they choose to purchase their own care and arrange their own care. And yes, we are the people that send you those bills as well. But we do take it very seriously that we only want people to pay what they can afford to pay in accordance with the legislation and guidance. So moving on to that, just for the anoraks amongst us, the legislation that underpins the charging is the Care Act 2014. What we use as sort of trying to interpret it more than the dire Care Act is the Department of Health Care and Support statutory guidance. Specifically sections 8 and 9 relate to charging for care, and then annexes A to F are also in relation to charging for care. So there's our specifics. If you do have a question, I can't see anything, and I know that there is a section at 2:10 to listen. So if you can just hold those thoughts for me, I'd be really appreciative. So underpinning all of that, well, not underpinning, but underneath all of that, we've got Nottinghamshire County Council's policy and some supplementary guidance. The guidance is to help people that use services, their carers, but there's also guidance for our workers, care assessors, people that do the financial assessments on good practice. I've been kicking around in social care for about 25 years now. In fact, I celebrated my 25-year anniversary of working for Notts County Council last week. So I wouldn't profess to be an absolute expert, but I pretty much know a lot of the stuff that's come up in the past. Obviously, there's still challenges on charging, and rightly so. The guidance that's been written by the Department of Health is not entirely helpful for either ourselves as practitioners or for yourselves as trying to unpick it. It isn't great. So we welcome, and I do mean that, we welcome when people challenge, and we do challenge the Department of Health frequently, because they put two pieces of legislation together in the Care Act, which was charging for residential care and charging for non-residential care, and they mixed and matched a little bit. So some of the things that were just intended to apply to people who were receiving care at home or in the community also applied to people that were in residential care, but that was never the intention. So we're continually finding anomalies, but that's the anorak bit over. I've finished now. So in terms of financial assessments, we operate three main types of financial assessments. So that's for people that go into long-term or permanent residential or nursing care, and that's in a care home setting. So I apologise if some of these terms are not what you would like. It's picked from the guidance, and it's picked from the Department of Health guidance. So if there is something that you think we can tweak, because I will be presenting this to other people, please let me know. We've then got short-term, respite, temporary care, also in a care home setting. The difference is because they are short term, we make additional allowances for the fact that people have still got to maintain a home, pay bills, keep their, maybe have heating on, etc. Have a partner or relative that's living at home. And just because they go into respite care, all of those financial commitments don't stop. And then we've got people that are living at in their own home, sometimes referred to as living in the community, but they access support, maybe day services as well. So it's not necessarily just people that are getting home care in their own homes. There's a range of services that are on offer that we do a financial assessment for. Think it's also important to note that you have got what we call flat rate or fixed charges. So these charges sit outside of the financial assessment and are therefore payable in addition to what you are assessed as needing to pay under the financial assessment. So transport and meals are the primary ones that people know about. So meals at home, sometimes referred to as meals on wheels by other local authorities, meals at day services. If we arrange and pay for transport to day services, or sometimes work placements, or sometimes temporary placements in care homes, they are all fixed charges. Brokerage for self-funders, that just relates specifically to people that are receiving care at home. We do not broker or charge for brokerage for people that go into residential care. This is purely for people that are able to pay the full cost of their care, but would prefer that the council arrange this for us. We cannot self-fund people that go into residential care. the guidance, the Department of Health guidance specifically forbids us from doing that. There are a few exceptions, but I don't want to bog you down with all the ifs, buts, and maybes. So we also charge for the Universal Deferred Payment Scheme. And what that is where people go into permanent care, i.e., a care home, we offer this scheme where they can let certain charges accrue against the value of their property. They can join this scheme so that they don't have to sell the property, and then it's but they obviously can't afford to pay all of their care costs because a lot of their wealth is tied up in their homes. Some people will hear the Universal Deferred Payment Scheme and hear they don't have to pay for, they don't have to sell their property. And that is true, but they do have to sell the property eventually. And it's not it's not as clear cut as what people would think, and it's not as clear cut as some of the politicians have led us to believe. When they say you won't have to sell your home, it means you won't have to sell your home in your lifetime. But when somebody passes away, or if they choose to then sell their property, any charges that have accrued against the value or the equity in that property become payable. So, in some cases, this is, a lot of money. People in care homes, charges aren't cheap. People may choose more expensive accommodation. So, than the council's willing to pay, so they top up, and therefore, there's hundreds of pounds of fees accrue each week against the value of a property, and house prices do vary, so it isn't a case that they don't ever have to sell the property because at some point this debt becomes due. So we've also got appointee and deputyship fees. So this is a case where a person isn't able to manage their own finances and they lack capacity to do that. We do not get involved just because someone would prefer it. The person has to lack capacity, and we're kind of a little bit of a last resort. So if there's family available, we ask them to be involved, which we know can be difficult. Some people do not want to get involved in their parents, relatives, etc. finances. However, we can signpost as well to some great organisations, but you need to understand that it's not free. And deputyship fees are particularly expensive. So what we always advise people is it's a few pounds to go and get a lasting power of attorney for someone for fees for their property and finances. Do it because it saves so much upset when people are in very difficult situations and then all of a sudden they can't access mum's money, and they don't know what to do, they don't know where to get help. And I think it's about, I can't remember what the fee is now, but it's under £100. It isn't an easy process, but it's you can do it yourself. I've done it myself. You don't need solicitors to get involved. And so I would strongly, strongly advise you to do that before someone might lack the capacity to make those choices or give you that power. But there's a cost to it. So it costs us to run that service. So we do have some flat rate charges. The deputyship fees that we charge are laid down by the Court of Protection, and they are substantially cheaper than what you would have to pay a solicitor. And you can manage this yourself. There is a wealth of information out there. And our guys in the appointee and deputyship team will give advice. They'll give you help on the process. They won't give you advice on what to do in terms of spending people's money and that kind of thing, but they are very versed with the process. So there are some free care. It's not huge, but it's worth noting that NHS continuing healthcare completely free. If it's jointly funded packages, the authority or Notts County Council can charge up to the amount that we put into the kitty, into the pot. People can't be charged for care support assessments or any form of care planning. That's, it's just illegal. We can't do that, and why would we anyway? Intermediate care, including reablement for, and I've highlighted that, up to 6 weeks. It's not a right to have 6 weeks free care. And this is when people come out of hospital and they are entitled to some support, which is funded through the NHS. Our reablement could be up to 6 weeks, but once the assessment has taken place and it's clear that an ongoing service is needed, some cases that reablement or that service is no longer reablement, it's no longer classed as reablement. It's an ongoing service, and that's at the point that it stops becoming free. And then we've got community equipment. It should be free. Minor adaptations, and that's ones that are under £1,000, and that's minor adaptations to somebody's home. And then there is support that's provided under Section 117 aftercare, and also for people with CJD. Those are two specific cases where care is free. So onto the actual kind of financial assessment part. So it's really important to know that most income is taken into account and taken into account in full. So there are exceptions, and it's earnings, and all everybody said earnings, really? But the idea behind having earnings being disregarded in its entirety is to encourage people to take up paid employment and not be penalised for it. So we don't take earnings into account. That includes any holiday pay, sick pay, retainers, bonuses, anything along those lines across all care types. We do not take that into account. Similarly, across all care and assessment types, so mobility component of DLA and PIP, we are not allowed to take that into account. No authority is allowed to take that into account. Similarly, child maintenance payments, child benefit and child tax credit. And then you've got war veterans payments, except constant attendance allowance. I won't go into the detail of that because we have only a handful of people that are on the War Veterans Scheme. There's 3 schemes: there's war widows, war widowers, war pensioners, war disablement, and then there's the war veterans. So there's all different categories, but it's the war veterans that all of their payment under that scheme is ignored, except the constant attendance allowance, which is kind of allied to what we do for everybody else who gets like attendance allowance or DLA care or PIP. That's not mobility, that's for care. We can take those into account, but everything else for war veterans payments get ignored. So savings credit is disregarded in full for people living at home. There's not many people that get savings credit anymore, but it is ignored. So it can be a substantial income for some people. But when we say savings credit, we need to be very clear that there are 2 elements. There's pension credit and a savings credit element of pension credit, and it's the savings credit element that is ignored. So some people just get a letter saying it's pension credit. We then have to go and explore to see whether actually we need to ignore some of that, because the DWP are not great at telling people the whole story sometimes. So we do check that there isn't an element of savings credit. It's nobody can get it anymore, but historically we've got some people that are still in receipt of it. And then people that get regular charitable or voluntary payments, they have to be disregarded in full. For instance, the Red Cross do some payments, British Legion do some payments. There's, a number of people. They don't have to be a recognised charity for us to ignore it, but it just needs to show that there are kind of regular voluntary payments being received, and then they can be ignored. And then people that get payments from a number of trusts, and there's a whole list of it in the legislation. But just to give you a couple, there's the Macfarlane Trust, and the most recent one was the We Love Manchester Emergency Fund, where money was paid out or continues to be paid out, and that has to be disregarded. And I did mention war widows, war widowers, and war disablement. This is a partial disregard of £10 per week. So it's the rest of it can be taken into account in the financial assessment. Okay, hope everybody's all right up till then. So we'll then move on to capital savings, whatever you want to call it. I prefer savings. It means more to people. Capital is how it's referred to in the guidance and legislation that we work to, but I think people more understand that it's money that they've got put aside. So up to 14,250 is ignored, and that's what they call the lower savings or lower capital limit. Some people will hear, and they put it in the Daily Mail every now and again, that care is free if you've got under 14,250. That is not true. It just means that we do not assume any income from your savings. It does not mean that care is free. And then we've got 23,250 is the upper capital limit, and that's when full cost charges become payable. And then in between those two limits, there is this concept of tariff income. And it's not designed to reflect any interest or bonuses or anything along those lines. It is simply a straightforward, well, I say straightforward, it is a calculation. So we take £1 of income into account for every £250 between those lower and upper limits. And if you've got £150, it would still be £150 above the lower limit, it would still be £1. It says or part thereof, so it's their term, not mine. What it is important to note, though, is that certain investment bonds with life assured are disregarded in full. So if somebody has got bonds or they mention bonds, we do not send them away and say, go and make your own arrangements. We do not assume that they are going to be the full cost, because some of those are disregarded. It does depend who's life assured, does depend on the nature of the bond. We are not financial advisors. We're not aware of all the financial products. So we would ask you for details of that so that we can make sure that if we are taking it into account, we're doing it rightly and not something that should be ignored. We'll go on to, I've called it capital and savings again, but this is about assets. So this is about the value of a person's property. So if they're living at home, it's got to be ignored. Pure and simple, that's it. And it's also ignored for the first 12 weeks when they move into a care home on a permanent basis. So if they move into a care home on a temporary basis, it's ignored anyway. But you need to understand it's the first permanent stay. So if they get continuing health care, if they self-fund for any length of time, the clock starts, the 12-week starts from the date they move into that care home. So it used to be from the date that the council funded, again, it's an example of where they tried to mishmash a couple of charging regimes together, and it came out that they no longer allow it for people that have had continuing healthcare. I think some of that was probably meant on purpose, because the idea behind the 12-week disregard was to give people time to explore what they might want to do with the property, have those discussions with relatives, and not make people sort of have a jump into a particular course of action. And I suppose if someone's been self-funding their care at home, in the care home, or they've had some continuing healthcare funding, then they've had that time to look at options, get advice, etc. So that's where the 12-week disregard comes from. So we then go on to allowances, and this is kind of money that you can keep. That's what I would say. So in a care home, it's quite straightforward. It's a personal expenses allowance, which from April is £30.15. And if eligible, on the top of that, it's a savings credit disregard. Now, when I often get asked this by social workers, and they go, "Is that all that a person can live on?" I feel it's a very derogatory term to refer to it as pocket money. It is a personal expenses allowance, but it is very small, and it does go up each year. It's one of the few things that does go up each year in terms of allowances, but it's going up by very, very small amounts. It doesn't keep track with the cost of living. And we do know that historically, a lot of siblings or children will supplement this for their parents who've gone into a care home. And unfortunately, there are very, very few exceptions for varying that amount. One of them is if they're having to maintain a home, and then, we will consider if they've got to pay for certain upkeep because a partner's still living at home. But that is supposed to cover personal expenses. So that would be things like chiropody, hairdressing, toiletries, clothes. Anything else, if the home is asking for anything else, they shouldn't be, because everything else should be funded by the council. That's all their accommodation needs, all their care needs, and anything else that might be related to their care. This is things that a person can choose to pay for. Okay, it gets a little bit more complicated with allowances at home. We bring into this the concept of minimum income guarantee, which is supposed to cover daily living expenses. It also applies to temporary care home residents. Now, I won't blow our trumpet here, but I do think that we are a lot more generous than a lot of authorities, because we will allow the MIG rate for people that go into care homes on a temporary basis, because we do recognise that people have still got expenses to pay for to keep and maintain their home and maintain partners or wives, husbands, etc. It is the case in a lot of authorities that when someone goes into a care home, even on a temporary basis, they will only allow the personal expenses allowance plus, it varies, but between 20 and £50 per week. So I think that we've got this fair, that we allow that MIG level, because it does mean that people have still got and are still able to keep a household going. And then we've got two levels. We've got over pensionable age, and that's in accordance with the government guidance. And we've got under pensionable age, and I've got those the wrong way
That,
round. So deliberate mistake, not, but just in case everybody's gone to sleep, that was just thrown in there to make sure that you were all watching. So I will swap those over. But the over pensionable age is a fixed sum, and most authorities just stick with that. The under pensionable age has a lot of variables, but we go for what we class as the highest that we can allow. And we don't have a different level for 18 to 25-year-olds, which an awful lot of authorities have a lesser amount. I don't know why that came about. It came about through some sort of Department of Works guidance, probably with the fact that people of that age didn't go out into the world, which I don't think applies and hasn't applied for a number of years. We couldn't get to the bottom of it. We even wrote a couple of letters to ministers when we were devising this latest charging policy, couldn't get to the bottom of it. And so we came up with the conclusion that people between the ages of 18 and 25 should not be penalised and should be allowed to have and retain £183 per week to cover their daily living expenses. And this leads on very nicely to what Catherine and Adrian will be talking about, which is the disability related expenses. We allow a standard amount of £20 per week. That's if we are taking into account disability benefits. If a person doesn't have disability benefits, that's DLA, PIP, attendance allowance, we don't make that standard allowance. How anybody would be receiving care if they're not in receipt of one of those benefits, it would bemuse me, but that's the fact of it. So I will stop sharing, hopefully, and close that down. Right. Did I stop sharing?
You did, Bridget. Thank you very much. Thank you for that.
I'm sorry. I hope it wasn't too dry.
It was very useful.
Very useful, very informative for everybody. Absolutely. I'm going to save questions for after Catherine and Adrian, if that's okay. Are you all right to stay with us, Bridget?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, I'm just going to turn my video off and mute though, if that's okay with everybody.
Absolutely lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll hand over to Adrian and Catherine now, who are ready and going to take us through disability related expenditure and the way they've been involved as carers in developing that.
Right, so if I start, pick up, Catherine can follow on. Catherine and I have been involved from the start of co-production in developing disabled-related expenditure guidance, and I'd just like to tell you about my experiences, including a few examples. Co-production group regularly review DRE to ensure that the values are kept in line with the cost of living increases, and this allows for additional areas to be considered at the same time. I'm a parent carer of a son, Dale, who has complex needs and who lives in supported living and looked after by Reach Learning Disability, for which I'm proud to be a trustee. As a result of austerity, the political decisions over the last decade have reduced funding for the councils. Consequently, as the councils have to balance their budgets, they need the contributions of care to support other vulnerable people and avoid further cuts to services that people rely on. The Care Act provided a legal framework for charging for appropriate care and support services. As a result, the local authority will carry out a care assessment and decide whether the person has eligibility needs. That enabled people to continue living independently in their own homes. After these charges were implemented, Dale had an assessment of his care needs, which we used the social worker knowledge of Dale's condition to confirm what was need over nice to have. We also went through a financial assessment alongside his care needs, but at the time the only supporting information was the basic disabled-related expenditure guidance from the government, which, as Bridget said, was very basic. We provided information about all of his costs and some examples of what we were able to identify as eligible were, as he's a wheelchair user, he has to make savings for an advance payment for a 5-year wheelchair accessible vehicle to replace his existing Motability vehicle when it's due. The unadapted vehicles are normally a 3-year lease, but the adaptations cost more and therefore are done over a longer period. With all the Motability funds being used to lease a vehicle, transport costs above the weekly norm for his income were allowed for his wheelchair adapted vehicle, which allows him to use it in the community. And for that, we had the history of all the receipts for costs. Dale has poor circulation as a wheelchair user, and consequently his legs are always cold and he needs additional heating, which is covered by higher gas and electric costs. Dale has epilepsy, which is triggered by overheating. So in the summer, he needs constant cooling by fans that we have to regularly replace. His wheelchair covers need regular washing, which wears them out, needing frequent replacement. The NHS, in providing a wheelchair, requires you to have an insurance to protect it against loss and accidental damage. Due to his medical conditions, we have to regularly purchase many health and personal care products for which we have a history of receipts, including special dental equipment. In addition to laundry costs for the 2 residents at the property, a different staff member covers a sleeping shift every night. The separate washing required results in much higher laundry costs, which is shared between the residents. Frequent washing also results in higher replacement costs, and not only bedding, but also of clothing. Unable to undertake jobs around the house, he needs the support of a window cleaner and a gardener. Once a week, he goes out for a meal with his support staff, and the cost to him of that amount, the support staff meals are eligible for DRE, as he could not go out without them. Without being able to receive NHS podiatry, he is eligible for the costs of podiatry separately. Many forms of identification are needed to live his life these days. Disability entitlement, identity cards, CEA cards, the blue badge itself. Appropriate ones are eligible. These days, a financial assessment or needs assessment by Nottinghamshire County Council should include a copy of the latest disability-related expenses guidance and allow a conversation for people to think about the day-to-day life, allowing the individual to identify the costs that they may have to pay for equipment or services, or when they're having higher than average outgoings as a result of having a disability or long-term health condition, matching the need on an individual basis. Under the Care Act, charges must not reduce people's income below a weekly amount known as the minimum income guarantee, which is the minimum you need to cover your living costs. In being allowed to reduce people's benefits by charging for care, when the financial teams become aware that people are making additional charges, they need to respond quickly to adjust the charges in order that they're able to cover their living costs. The minimum income guarantee is set by the Department of Health and is reviewed annually, although no allowance for the inflation was made from its implementation in 2015 until a 3% increase in 2022. When calculating charges for care and support, finance start on how much money is being received from pensions and benefits, as well as details of any capital assets such as savings, investments and property or land that's owned. Ensuring the person is allowed to keep the minimum income guarantee and all agreed disabled related expenditure allows the charges to be calculated by taking that from the money that is being received. And as Bridget said, the overarching principle being that people should only be required to pay what they can afford, and this should never be more than the cost of the service. Standard allowance of £20 is made for disabled-related expenditure in all cases by Nottingham County Council, where disability benefits are being taken into account. However, this can be more if the person has additional higher costs because of their disability or illness. Good financial record keeping and identifying new entitlement has become an additional burden on top of carers' existing duties. And since Dale's original assessment, we regularly come across additional costs that we've had to pay because of his disability, that previously been unidentified or have changed. Perhaps a good example of that is when his Motability vehicle came up for renewal. It was a different advance payment. We also kept receipts for fuel for 3 months and then notified the changes to the community assessment team. The email address is in the disabled related expenditure guidance. If agreed, and it usually is, if it's in line with the guidance, we were then notified of the changes. Knowing that the vehicle was due for replacement in 5 years, it was easy to work out with the costs how much that was going to work out as a weekly payment. Prior to COVID, we regularly took Dale on holiday for a part week, allowing staff to take him later in the year. And Dale can pay for his costs, but when we were able to re-establish this last year, supporting hotel costs were allowed along with the additional travel costs for getting there. As it's planned to repeat this every year, a weekly allowance was calculated and agreed. A variety of other things have been identified as they become necessary, and a couple of examples would be replacement pads on the side of the bed. And during an extended summer heat wave last year, we had to put in some extra strong fans to keep him cool, otherwise because of the epilepsy concerns. Everything identifies followed the same process, as in most cases a receipt is available, and although not always necessary, an estimated life before replacement allows a weekly replacement cost to be agreed, as long as it's within the guidance. So that's my experience, and I'll pass you over to Catherine for hers. I think you're on mute, Catherine, sorry.
Thanks, Adrian. As you know, I'm Catherine. And to give you a little bit of background, I'm a carer to my son who has an extremely rare progressive genetic condition, which includes lung fibrosis and neuropathy. I've also cared for other relatives during my adult life, so hopefully I can relate to a lot, or at least some of the challenges that carers face. My son received a letter from Notts County Council in 2019 asking him to start paying towards his care and support, and he just couldn't get his head around that. So it was quite a stressful time, causing great upset to him and obviously subsequently me. So as his carer, I felt that I needed to do something to help him other than just supporting him financially myself. I wrote to ACFS, Adult Care Financial Services, as a social worker had told me to, advising them that he had an assistance dog, which cost him a considerable amount of money to keep. So he just couldn't afford to pay the level of contribution that Notts County Council were asking for. They advised me, though, that I needed to contact social care, which I did again. During my initial telephone call, I was advised by the social worker that he didn't think an assistance dog would be considered a DRE. which I, of course, argued. And eventually, my son's DRE was increased to reflect the costs incurred by having an assistance dog. He did, though, of course, have other increased costs relating to his disability, but with no clear guidance, it was difficult to know where to start. With the work I undertake for Reach Learning Disability, supporting other carers, it wasn't long before some of those carers were coming to me for help with DRE. Some advised that they'd been turned down for things like decorating and riding for the disabled. So really, we're all pretty much in the dark. A meeting took place with a group of carers and the then Director of Services, Paul Johnson, and inevitably DRE issues were raised. Whilst he made it clear that it had been the councillor's decision to change Notts County Council's policy for charging, and he was just a paid officer, he acknowledged that there wasn't any in place. A small group of us carers subsequently met with Bridget, who listened to our concerns, and she agreed that guidance needed to be put in place. So as a result, our co-production journey started. It took many meetings, but we did agree some guidance, and we presented it to the senior leadership team at Notts County Council for approval. And in due course, it was finally approved. At least we now had some guidance in place, which was certainly more than many local authorities had. Adrian has provided some great examples of costs that may constitute a disability-related expenditure. And whilst the guidance shows more, it is not exhaustive. Other costs can be considered, but need to relate to each individual's disability and/or health conditions and their subsequent need. How I look at DRE is, does the cost relate to a want or a need? For example, I can manage my own finances, but that isn't the case for everyone. And as Bridget was talking about, a deputyship may need to put in place, which carries a cost. And that's clearly a disability-related expenditure. Some other DRE costs I've supported other carers with is, which you may never have considered really. One gentleman needs 2 iPads because he can't use one when it's plugged in because that doesn't meet his sensory needs. So one has to be plugged in while he's using one so that they can be swapped over. And that may seem extreme, but this gentleman has behaviours of concern. So if they're not going to be met by the iPad, then his behaviours will increase. So the social worker could confirm that to Adult Care Financial Services. So the involvement of the social care worker is therefore really important because they can verify what a person's needs are. Another example is an adult therapy swing for the garden, which again alleviated behaviours of concern. As Adrian has said, additional costs to enable people to access a short break holiday. So this could be care costs not provided by funding, or it could be additional accommodation costs for the carer, or indeed for some, they may need 2 carers to be able to go away. I can just book a holiday and I've not got to think about all of those things. So it's clearly not a want, it's a need for somebody. One lady uses a CPAP machine overnight to help her with her sleep and her breathing. And that inevitably has increased electricity costs. So her mum has a smart meter. So she could see what the increased electricity costs by using the smart meter with the machine running and when it wasn't. And that then became a disability-related expenditure and reduced the contribution to care. Thing to remember is that things like capital items have to be converted to a weekly cost, as DRE is calculated weekly, as are the contributions to care. So, for instance, as Adrian has mentioned, if you've already used your mobility element of your PIP or DLA to lease a mobility car, but you may need to purchase something like a mobility scooter. So if that costs, say, £2,500, you might think that that could last 5 years. Then £2,500 is divided by 5 years, and then divided again by 52 weeks for each of those years. And that would result in a weekly DRE of £9.62. And that can seem complicated, but ACFS and Bridget and her team are always on hand to help. So the other thing that I think is important to remember is that Notts County Council automatically give a £20 disability-related expenditure as standard. So you can only add costs above that to reduce your contribution to care further. And as Adrian's mentioned, the guidance is reviewed regularly. So if anybody's interested in joining our little co-production group, we'd love to hear from you. And we realise constantly that the guidance can still be improved. So if you don't want to actually join us on our journey, we're going over to some questions and answers, and we'd certainly be interested to hear any suggestions that you might have that the guidance can be improved. We don't think it's perfect, but we've come a long way with the journey. So over to Helen and questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Catherine and Adrian. Really helpful. Shows us as well what getting involved can do. So for Adrian and Catherine's involvement to have led to the updated guidance and the impact that that's had is outstanding. So thank you both of you for contributing as carers to this, and I'm sure it's been helpful to Bridget and her team as well in developing that work. So we'll open for questions for Bridget, for Adrian and for Catherine if anybody wants any clarification or to ask any questions. Claire.
Apologies. I've got a son that lives full-time at home, complex needs. I've understand a little bit about the DRE, but obviously there's that calculation over a 5-year period. Does that automatically go forward into the next financial year? Because we've just recently done it last year, and basically they completely disregarded the expenses. So Tom's contribution was £60 a week. So I went back and reminded them, and it went down to £30 a week. So is there a system at the local authority end to ensure that figure is carried over, or is it just reviewed at the yearly review?
Shall I come in there? Is that
Yeah.
okay? Short answer is yes, there is a system. Every year in April, when all the benefits go up, we carry forward the disability related expenses. We battle with our IT system every year, and every year it does something different. So this year, instead of carrying over the £20 plus the additional expenses, in a lot of cases, it just carried over the £20. So we then had to go back and find them all and re-put things in. And in a lot of cases, it was an increased cost because, as Adrian says, we review each year because we don't expect that those costs stay static. For instance, for gardening and cleaning, we increase those according to the rate that we pay PAs that get a DRE. So there's all kinds of anomalies. It didn't, but it should carry over. And we're supposed to carry it over for the period of time. So like we're saying, if it's 5 years, we're supposed to carry it over for 5 years. Realistically, that expense doesn't stop at 5 years. So we carry it on because you're either saving for something else or a replacement, or costs have gone up. So we just carry it on, full stop. And then we just rely on people to say, actually, this has gone up now. Can you review it? And we're more than happy to review it.
So from the point of view of, there's the £20 a week disability cost, plus the £183.25, the minimum income guarantee.
Yes, that's what people can retain to live off. It's not, we know it's not huge. It's what what's specified. It's the most we can allow. Well, it's not the most. We could up the standard rate from £20 to something else. What I do is a benchmarking exercise against probably about 30 different authorities, and I ask them what their average DRE is, and we come out, I think last year it was £11.98, something like that. So £20 is still quite generous, but nevertheless it's there for a reason.
Yeah, and I think Catherine's clarified my other question, which my son's ventilated at night, he's got chargers, he's got electric beds. So it sounds like we need to get a smart meter in order to justify how much it costs us then.
You wouldn't need to get a smart meter. That's an option. If you give us details of those bills, we try and be as least administrative a burden on you as possible. So if you've got details of what it's costing on a monthly basis, we can compare average expenditure is this, your expenditure is this.
Okay.
We don't say, oh no, I'm sorry, you've got a fridge running and you've got an electric cooker and you've got this and that. We just go, this is the average, you've got higher costs and therefore the higher costs will be allowed.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. Thank you.
After we've taken the £20 into account, as Catherine said.
Okay, thank you.
I just remind you as well that you keep the mobility element.
Well, it goes on the vehicle,
Yes.
yeah.
But for
Yeah.
some people, you see, they don't have a vehicle, so they use it for other things. It's very much an individual thing. And the guidance so when Adrian's our expert on the Office of National Statistics, so we look at who's on the lowest income and how much they can afford to spend on gas and electric. So there's something in the guidance there. I think it was quite innovative of this lady because there's 3 people in her household, so it was a little bit more complicated to use the smart meter because it gives you an absolute that it's this much, 7p per hour or whatever extra over 7 nights a week. So it was just an easy way of doing it. But, Bridget's been really helpful. She's been open to our journey and wanted to come with us on this. We couldn't have done it without her. So she's very open to anybody asking any questions. And, if you're in doubt, have the conversation. Don't hold back. If you think it's the DRE, put it forward.
And you've got my name now. So you know where I live.
That's it. Thank you. Diane's got her hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Diane.
Yeah, I guess it's just to see what Adrian thinks, what Catherine thinks, and obviously what Bridget thinks. But about 3 or 4 weeks ago, my brother was under 65, had his a care assessment, his annual one, a bit overdue. And I said to the social worker present, my brother had multiple strokes about 3 years ago, which meant he would never be able to drive again. He can't even have one of these disabled buggies or whatever. He gets the full points for reading under the PIP. So his eyesight is not very good at all. So I said to the social worker, bearing in mind Stephen only gets 5 hours community a week out of his home, which is obviously not very much because he was a Jack the lad. He lived on his own before that, had a great life, thankfully. So what he does is he has a high sports package from Virgin, which he's happy to pay for because obviously he don't have very little else. But what we did try to do on the advice of one of the ophthalmic, not an ophthalmic surgeon, because he goes regularly to the Hallamshire for that, but just what one of the people, aides or whatever about. So they said, what about trying high definition, Stephen, on your television, paying for it? And I said, oh, that's a good idea, Steve, for football, because it's no good watching football if you can't see it ball, is it? And so to cut a long story short, I asked the social worker what he thought about it at the assessment, and he said, yes, I would support that. I'll take it back. And then a while later, a few days later, he rang me up, asked for more information, and I gave him what I'd got. And then he rang me back and said that the manager had refused it to put it through because she thought it was a health issue. Well, he hadn't got trouble with his eyes before. He had got trouble with his eyes before, which was an iritis thing. And I think that's what the manager had got hung up on, if you see what I mean. That is still running and will always run with Stephen. But the fact that he can't drive because of his multiple strokes regarding his eyes, as well as his physical disability for his legs. The fact that they said because of his vision, it would not be safe for him to even have one of these disabled buggies. The fact that, as I say, he gets the full 8 points out of 8 on the PIP for reading, I feel that it should be taken into account as DRE, and would just be interested in what Adrian and or Catherine and obviously Bridget thinks about that. And obviously my next thing is, after today, I am going to kind of, you know, write in about it.
Thank you, Diane. Thoughts, everybody?
We want
I mean, my initial thoughts were that, I mean, clearly it is an additional need. It is not a nice to have. And we have generally said, as we've been going through the disabled related guidance, that any health needs which aren't funded by health could be covered by the disabled related expenditure. But I'm sure perhaps Bridget is the best one to clarify that. But
I think there's two things here. I think that Diane has gone back to the social care manager and asked for that to be funded, rather than coming through to ACFS and asking that to be made as an allowance, because I don't think you were saying that you were purchasing it yourself, were you? I think what you were saying is that you were going back and asking for that to be funded by Nottinghamshire County Council, and that's what's been refused. If you chose to purchase that yourself, then we would definitely allow that as a DRE and not a health need, because we are well aware that health doesn't fund for half of the things that, you know, we think it should. They you know, they've got a limited pot of cash, so we would, you know, for instance, we allow for continence products, which are a health need, but we know that what they give is not sufficient for an awful lot of people, or not suitable. So just coming back to you, Diane, was that a case of you wanted that funded, but the manager said, no, actually that's a health need, and therefore you need to approach the health authority, have that funded, or something different?
No, they said it wasn't. She wasn't. The social worker guy said no. There were two things that I and I'm not going to bore you with the second, so I'm going to get in touch with you, you know, separately.
Yes,
right?
by all means.
But he said no, I agree, Stephen. You know, he as I say, our Stephen, he's in this house 7 times 24 minus 5 hours per week community. This is a lad at 63 who was previously a Jack the Lad. You know, his life's been changed unbelievably so. So I mean, he's happy to pay for his Virgin Sports package and you know, and everything. But as I say, it was the ophthalmic department at the Hallamshire in Sheffield who said, you know, high definition, and this is in your television. So we've been paying for it for, not we, sorry, Stephen's been paying for it as part of the package for probably over a year. And I just thought, fine. Wait, but the man said, the social worker man, Alan Butterley said, I'll go and ask my manager if she'll support for DRE. And they said, no, we won't support because it's a health issue. And I think, Bridget, they got caught on hung up on this iritis thing, which is a health thing, and not the fact of how this eyesight's been affected by the multiple strokes.
I understand. Please come and speak to me, Diane, or come and speak to someone in the team. That's clarified it for me. As I say, we do allow for health needs where we know that the health authority will not fund certain things, and you know, a gym package, because he's got limited access to alternatives and chooses to pay for that. It's coming back to what Catherine says. Okay, he chooses to pay, but realistically, it's more of a need than a want. You know, it is a
thought so, and social worker agreed. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. He
Yeah.
supported it and then came back. So anyway, let's pass on to somebody else, because thank you for listening to me anyway.
Thank you, Diane.
Clearly a training need, isn't there? And Bridget and Adrian, myself, are working on putting we have been involved in training staff, but we're putting something else together. And it's really important that you've raised those things, Diane, because it's clearly a misunderstanding by the manager, and they need to, it's not just you, they need to understand the bigger issue as well. And this will help others, Diane. So thanks for raising it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
And I
you.
think the guidance actually suggests that if you're not happy with the way that your DRE has been handled, then you should take it forward to the finance department, who will be able to look into it and give you some clarity. So if it's not been correctly done, if the training hasn't worked, then that can be corrected and hopefully that can be picked up. So again, it's contacting Bridget and her team, and hopefully she can put that right.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. I'll get in touch with Bridget. Thank you.
Okay, I'm
Thanks,
going to
Diane.
take Suzanne's question, and then we do need to move over to Layla, who's joined us from Welfare Rights, so that she can talk about her work and what they can do as well. So Suzanne?
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you ever so much to those people to actually working very hard on this DRE, because I think all of us have struggled, and I just wanted to say thank you very much to them.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's really good of you. Thank you. Okay, so we've got Layla with us from Welfare Rights, and she is going to give us an overview of the support that is available to people and the information that you can get from the Welfare Rights team. Layla.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having me, inviting me along. Can I just echo as well that it's great to hear of that work that's been done, and to see people with lived in experience shaping the way that we do things going forward. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more of that in a lot more other areas of the council going forward as well. So really great to see that. Sounds like a fantastic piece of work. And so just following on then from the presentation we had from Bridget, touched on benefits a bit in there. I'm the Senior Benefits Officer for Notts County Council, and we have a benefits team here who can support with maximising income. So I just really want to talk about and spread the message really of the importance of getting benefits advice and maximising income. There's a stigma around benefits, particularly for some people, where they'll make assumptions perhaps that they might not be entitled to anything, that everything is means tested, but particularly where charging is concerned. So if a person is accessing adult social care and health, or they are on the adult social care and health radar, whether that's because they are receiving care services themselves, either in their own home, in a care home, either long-term or temporary, or you're a carer, it's really important that we target people to give them that benefits advice. So I hear regularly that there's a big issue that nobody knocks on your door and tells you what you're entitled to. So there's advice out there, there's agencies out there you can pop along to Citizens Advice, there's stuff online, there's pockets of advice sessions available in people's local areas, but a lot of people don't know where to start, they don't know what to ask, they don't know if it's relevant to them. So what we try to do, and what's great about Notts County Council still having and recognising the need for an internal benefits team, is that we can actually do that metaphorical sort of knocking on people's doors and saying, do you know, or did you know what you're entitled to, or let's look at what benefits you've got, let's see if we can increase them, or really a key thing for us, let's make sure that you're not missing out on anything. And by having an internal benefits team, it allows us to sort of offer that very early on in the journey. So people that might be just starting to approach adult social care and health, or have had a change and in their circumstances, their health condition, and now might need to access adult social care and health, when they start having those conversations with us at our customer service centre, or with our social workers, or whoever it might be, that person can then offer you a conversation with our team, a referral to us, so that at a very early point, we can get in touch with you, which is usually within 10 working days of receiving the referral. And we can have a conversation to look at what benefits you're on already. Can we increase anything? You know, is there an appeal that needs to be done because you're not happy with an outcome that you've had from maybe like an application for PIP or attendance allowance? You might not be happy with the level. There might have been a change and you feel if you know that it needs reviewing, but you want to talk to somebody about that first. So very early on, hopefully in that journey, somebody is knocking on your door to say, right, let's have a chat about benefits. Let's get you on everything that you're entitled to, so that when you move along that journey, if it turns into a financial assessment, a lot of that stuff is already in place and maximised. Because what we don't want and what we see a lot of is people not accessing the care and support that they need or they want through fear of paying for it. So we really want to try and eliminate that fear and give people the confidence to go into that journey, knowing that, as Bridget said, you will only be charged for what you can afford. So that's really what our team, as an internal team, really try and do. So another way of access, anybody can ring us. So you can get in touch with the Customer Service Centre, you can phone Notts County Council, you can go online at any point and speak to our team, have a referral to our team and get some advice. I have got a video to play you. I'm hoping it's going to work. I'm going to leave it till the end in case it decides to get a bit techie and doesn't play ball, and then I don't want to use all my little time slot up trying to get a video to it. But it will deliver this message hopefully a lot more glamorous than what I'm doing right now. But it's very good. It can show you how all walks of life can be eligible for benefits and how it can benefit people from across the board in getting advice. Yeah, so if somebody needs to speak to us, if they want to raise anything with us, they can contact us at any point. Or if you have a worker or you're having conversations with social care and health, we'd like to think that you'd be offered that anyway, particularly if anxieties around benefits or paying for care forms part of that conversation. We would like to think that you would be offered that, because we do actually try to target people. And we're also delivering some training to our adult social care and health workers as well, to give them a basic awareness of benefits, just so that they feel more empowered to have those conversations and know where to sort of get support for you if that forms part of that conversation on your journey into adult social care and health. So we are available for all residents of Notts County Council, and of course there are other places that you can get advice from as well if you feel that you need more face-to-face advice, because our team are a telephone advice team, although we can go really, really in depth with what we do. But certain people obviously would prefer face-to-face advice. So there are partner organisations like Citizens Advice that you can go to. Age UK as well offer an advice service. Disability Knots. There are varying ones depending on whereabouts you live in Nottinghamshire. But obviously the times change, the open times change, volunteers at those places change. So the best thing to do to get up-to-date information on what's available in your local area, if you did want to see somebody more face-to-face, is to still phone the Customer Service Centre, and they can signpost you to what's current. They've got the most up-to-date information, so they can tell you what's currently available near to you. Or if you'd like a chat with our team, you can ask for a referral into the benefits team, and we can get in touch with you and have a chat and answer any questions that you've got around benefits. But I can't stress enough the importance of getting benefits advice and not making the mistake of ruling yourself out because people assume that things are means tested or that they're already getting everything. And the reason for that is because we're not always necessarily identifying an extra income. Or if we do, it might be minimal. So it might not be that we're sort of increasing what a person's got coming in, but what we might be doing is saving a little bit of what they're paying out. So it might be a council tax discount or exemption. It might be a free TV license. So it's not always about bringing in extra income to make care more affordable. It might be reducing a bill elsewhere that subsequently makes care contributions more affordable. So there's a range of things, and there's no stone unturned when we do a benefits assessment with somebody. But any sort of questions about benefits advice, how to get it, how to speak to us, I'm all ears.
Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. Any questions for Layla?
Can I just say I had involvement with the carer and sorted out the benefits for her daughter, but she'd been on DLA and then subsequently PIP. She was 29 with Down syndrome. She didn't know anything about means tested benefits, and that she could have had ESN, subsequently had to go on to universal credit. So I think there's definitely a gap with social care assessments, that actually just automatically saying that you're available, because I've been involved in many, never had a suggestion of or perhaps once, and then trying to get hold of somebody was complex. And I've been told that we can't go direct to Notts County Council, the referral has to come through the social worker, all sorts of things. So I think if it can be better advertised, what you offer is brilliant, Layla, and I really look forward to seeing the video. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So we are aware that it's become a clunky process, because ultimately some time ago it used to be a question on the referral forms that were filled in when somebody came into adult social care and health. It was offered as a matter of course, without question. And then we've reviewed the workflows and the customer journey, and there's more of a reliance now on it forming part of conversations that we have within adult social care and health. And we know therefore that it can be missed, or if it doesn't form part of the conversation or come up in conversation, it's not then offered, which is why and we're aware of that, which is why we're going to be doing some training across the whole of adult social care and health, with some extra funding that we've had, to raise that awareness, empower staff to have those conversations. And the first one of those is on the 26th of March, and it's being rolled out across the whole department. So we really do hope to improve that as well, and improve that signposting and advertising to use our team.
That's great. Thank you, Layla. Bridget.
We know that an awful lot of people are coming up to have their PIP care and DLA care reviewed, and required to go and have assessments, and then being refused that benefit, or the benefit being lowered. Are we doing anything to support them, those people, or is there anywhere we can signpost these people?
Yeah, sure. So it's on our radar to do a lot more of appeal work. So you might remember, Bridget, back in the day when we had a bigger welfare rights team, part of that was appeals and representing at tribunals as well. And we know that there's an entitlement to PIP and these other disability benefits that people aren't getting, either because they're falling foul of the process that we've got in place, particularly with PIP, or it just might be, a lack of information on an attendance allowance form, because they aren't assessed, they aren't seen in person and assessed. Those decisions are made on a form. So what we don't want is people being told no, and it's stopping there. So yeah, we've got lots of work to do around appeals. We are more than happy to take any referrals for anybody that's been refused a benefit and wants to challenge it. It's rife within PIP, particularly with the transition of DLA to PIP, because it's totally different criteria. And there are some issues, don't want to talk too foully of anybody, but there are some issues with Capita, who we've got in doing these assessments as well, unfortunately. So much so that the DWP want to move away from that contract, but they're not able to at the moment. So yeah, lots of work that we need to do, and we're happy to take any referrals for those. And one thing to maybe mention on that is that we're only one of two authorities to have this. We've got an affiliation with Nottingham Law School. Our team pays £40 a year for that. And if we identify that someone has a case to appeal a PIP decision or whatever decision it might be, once they've gone through the mandatory consideration, we can refer them to get representation at tribunal level as well, using the Nottingham law students. So they're getting some free practice, and we're
Brilliant.
getting some free representation, and we're very, very, very lucky to have that. So yes, so lots of appeal stuff. Happy to receive any referrals where appeals go. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. Diane.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. I don't know if I'm a bit behind the door. Layla, have you taken over from Paul?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I thought Notts County Council had done away with welfare rights and there was only Paul, the last man standing. And all of a sudden you're talking about a team. Now, I've been off the radar a bit because, as I say, I look after a brother with multiple strokes and I look after a partner with dementia and other physical things. So, as I say, I could have been off the radar. Can you just kind of clarify for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So sorry, I probably should have done that in the beginning. So yeah, so Paul, we're not known as welfare rights. It's a term we've moved away from a little bit, and it tends to give the impression of a huge team as well, and we are not. So we're the benefits team, just got a new shortened name, been around for a while now. I worked with Paul for 10 years in that team before he retired. So he's retired now, and there's 4 of us left. So myself and 3 other girls, Becky, Charlotte and Amanda. So very, very small team. But with a big capacity, we can do lots, and we deal with the whole of Nottinghamshire. So yeah, small team, county-wide, dealing with all areas of Nottinghamshire, and you can refer into us either by the customer service centre. So a myth bust there, you do not need to be referred to us by a social care and health worker, GP, anybody. You can absolutely contact the customer service centre and ask for a referral yourselves.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. Thank you, Diane. Catherine.
Yeah, it's just to highlight to people, you have a very short timeline. You get 30 days, I think it is, for mandatory reconsiderations and subsequent appeals. So you've got to be hot on it and be aware of that, otherwise you'll fall foul of the system. And I've been involved in quite a lot of assessments, and it's often people with Asperger's, those sorts of conditions that are a little bit more hidden, really struggle, and it does depend on your assessor. So if anybody is supporting somebody with those, please be vociferous, don't stand back, because I've had people say, I don't have a problem with that. Then I'll challenge it within it and say, well, I understand what you're saying, but I've observed this and you do need support for this. So it's really important to get the benefits right.
Thank
so
you,
great
Catherine.
work, Layla. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thanks, Layla, because I think actually having been on the end of a capita assessment for PIP fairly recently, it's really helpful actually to know people can get in touch with you themselves through the customer service centre, because I don't think I was aware of that. So it'll definitely be something that I'll be sharing with colleagues and other people. So
yeah, we're looking to
really
open up the goalposts. So the CSD, obviously, if we took referrals for every single person that rang into the service centre, we just wouldn't meet our timescales at all. So they do some filtering out and signposting. More, I would say, for people who aren't maybe accessing that adult social care and health, on that radar, if you like. But certainly if you are. But where they do signpost a lot out, funnily, I've had this conversation this morning. We are looking. But by looking at the ways we working more efficiently, which is something we've been wanting to do for a while now, and something I've been focusing on since I've taken over, looking at our ways of working to work more efficiently so that we can open those doors a little bit more at the customer service centre for a bit less signposting and a little bit more open to us as well. So we're always sort of looking at that to try and widen those goalposts a little bit. But absolutely, yeah, you do not need to be referred in by a worker. Anybody can ring us.
Okay.
And you can do it online. So even online, yes, we've got our web pages which we write and maintain. We've got an online referral option, so you can fill in the contact us bit on our web pages, and that's a referral to us online, which the CSC will then receive and put on Mosaic for us. So you can refer yourself in online as well if you wish.
Okay,
that's really useful, Layla. Thank you. Okay, we are at the end of time. I'm just going to do a very quick recap and tell you where you can find out more information. So those of you who haven't joined us before, we've got our website, which I'll pop the link in to the chat. and our email address, which I will also pop into the chat. And all the information from today, including the recording of the session and some links that will help with more information on the things that have been discussed today, will appear on the website, and a link to Layla's video as well. And also on our website, you'll find opportunities for carers to get involved in different things around that are happening around the county. James is all set to send out some information about those opportunities to the carer space mailing list over the next couple of days. He's got some little summaries ready to go of some of the things that are happening at the moment. We are always keen to hear from people like yourselves who have been on these meetings or have been part of the group, who want to tell us what else you'd like to find out about. What do you want to know? What do you want to be involved in? What are you struggling with? What have you heard today that you'd like to find out more about, and how can we help you to do that? So if you can get in touch with us, we would be delighted to hear from you about anything to do related to you and your caring role, and the services that are provided and working for you as carers. So please get in touch. Thank you ever so much to our speakers this afternoon, to Bridget, to Adrian, Catherine and Layla, for sharing all of that really valuable information with everybody. I'm sure people will go back and rewatch this and hear the information that you've shared this afternoon and have a look at the resources. If any questions do come through to the carer space email address, then James will forward them on to make sure that we get the right answers to them. And we can put you in touch with people as well. If carers come to us, we can put you directly in touch with the right people to give you those really valuable bits of information. So again, thank you ever so much, and please check out the website. It will give you more information. Sign up to the mailing list if you haven't already done so, and James will keep in touch with you all as he always does. So thank you for your time this afternoon, everybody. Have a lovely rest of your day.